How does burden of proof work in property tax hearings? Have you ever wondered what it takes to challenge your property tax assessment? Understanding the burden of proof in property tax hearings is essential for anyone considering an appeal. So, how does this process actually work? In property tax hearings, the burden of proof generally lies with the taxpayer. This means that if you believe your property has been overvalued, it is your responsibility to provide convincing evidence that the assessor's valuation is incorrect. The assessor's valuation is typically assumed to be accurate unless you can demonstrate otherwise. To succeed, you need to present relevant and independent evidence. This can include formal appraisals, comparable sales data, or other valuation documents. The burden of proof has two main parts: the burden of production and the burden of persuasion. The burden of production means you must present enough evidence for the hearing board to consider your case. If you fail to provide sufficient evidence, your appeal could be dismissed outright. The burden of persuasion is where you must convince the fact finder, like an assessment appeals board, that your evidence shows the assessor's valuation is wrong. You need to prove this by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning it is more likely than not that your valuation is correct. Typically, the assessor's valuation is presumed accurate. Therefore, you must actively prove that the assessment is too high or incorrect. However, there are exceptions where the burden shifts to the assessor. This includes appeals involving single-family dwellings occupied by the owner as a primary residence or cases where proper paperwork was filed but the purchase prices were not enrolled. During the hearing, both you and the assessor can present evidence and testimony. It is important to be prepared with credible documentation to support your claim. While it can be helpful to point out flaws in the assessor's evidence, you must also prove that your evidence is stronger to succeed in your appeal. Often, there is an informal meeting before the formal hearing where both parties exchange evidence. The hearing board will review all submitted evidence and decide if you have met the burden of proof to adjust the assessment. In summary, the burden of proof in property tax hearings requires you to demonstrate that the assessor's valuation is incorrect, except in specific cases where the assessor must prove their assessment is accurate. Effective preparation and presentation of independent, relevant evidence are key to a successful appeal.